yellow.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast. I'm Dr. Randy Cook, and I'll be your host for the program. We'll get into today's interview in just a moment, but first I want to remind everyone that our podcast is sponsored by MD Coaches, a company dedicated to empowering physicians to realize a greater potential and to achieve a greater level of satisfaction in their chosen fields. You can find MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com. My guest today is Dr. Marlene Wüst-Smith, who currently resides in a very small village in northern Pennsylvania near the New York border. Marlene is a pediatrician who has had an interesting career in a number of different practice settings, which we'll talk about at some length. Most recently, her pediatric practice has shifted to locum contracts, and that has freed up time for her to pursue another dream, which is to publish a magazine aimed at examining physician lifestyle, both inside and outside the clinical setting. Our interview was recorded in mid-June during the COVID-19 pandemic, so now let's hear that conversation. So I'm talking today with Dr. Marlene Wüst-Smith, who is, actually your home is up in northern Pennsylvania, is it not, Marlene?
It is, in
but you're not
God's
home
country. I'm not home today. I'm at my cousin's home on a lake in upstate New York, a couple of hours from my home.
Sounds like a good place to be.
It is.
When you're being quarantined. And
Yes.
I will mention for our listeners that as we speak, we are still dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, and that has changed lives for a lot of us. I bet we'll have some things to say about that as well. So welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here with us. It's great to talk to you today.
Thanks for having me, Randy. It's an honor and a pleasure to be speaking to you.
Well, you're very kind. And what I'd like to do is what we always do on the program, and talk about your beginnings. I know, or at least I think I know, you were born in New York City back in the 60s. Is that correct?
Yes, 1963.
And tell us about growing up in New York.
So my earliest memories are living with my father and grandparents, my paternal grandparents, up in Upper Harlem. My dad was left Cuba, one of the earliest in his family to leave, upset with the revolution and Castro's takeover. Yes. So
he must have left under fairly challenging circumstances.
Yes, he was. His claim to fame was that he was on one of the last open or free flights out of Cuba before it became illegal to leave. But he didn't know whether he'd see any of his family again. They had a big party for him. He bought drinks for everyone on the plane on the way to Miami and was bad-mouthing Castro.
Yeah.
And then there was bad weather in Miami, and they had to turn around and go back to Havana.
Oh, my goodness.
So he was afraid he was going to get arrested, but fortunately, he made it out on a plane the next day. But
indeed, it was fortunate.
It was.
All right. Well, I'll let you get on with your story, but that's an interesting thing.
So my father is one of my inspirations, one of the hardest working men I have ever met. Never finished high school. Actually got emancipated at the age of 16 or 17 to open up his own bars in Havana, and was a minor, but was able to get adults. He's always been a wheeler and dealer, and very successful, but without a formal education. And early on in my childhood, I remember him asking me, from the time I could remember, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I always said that I wanted to be either a teacher. I loved children. I loved visiting anybody who had kids. I was the one that entertained babies. And he would shake his head and said, not a teacher. You can be a teacher, but you need to get an education. You like to spend a lot of money. You need to do something that will make you some more money than a teacher can make.
That's interesting advice.
It was. And in the end, I didn't go into medicine or pediatrics because of the money, but I'm very fortunate that he inculcated that thought in my head when I was very young, that the importance of he thought that success meant being a lawyer, being a physician. My aunt, his older sister, was a chemist. So he valued education, and interestingly, education for women. He always said to me and to my younger cousins, you need to have an education so that you never have to depend on a man. And
so he was really ahead of his time.
He was. And from an era where that wasn't, practically speaking, you didn't see that, and you didn't see it in Cuba. So I'm
he was
very
a
blessed.
Really forward thinker, and indeed you are fortunate.
Yes. So I think at the age of 7, it was when I first said I wanted to be a pediatrician, and I stuck with it. I didn't really understand too much about medicine at that time. When I was very young, the doctors I would go to would be the emergency room. I don't know if he had insurance or didn't have insurance, but if I was sick or got hurt or needed something, I think that they primarily used emergency room care. My parents, my mom was very young when I was born, and they got divorced by the time I was 9 months old. So my dad was raising me along with his elderly parents while he worked all day. I stayed with them, and
that's kind of unusual. Usually it's the other way around, as you know.
Correct.
In
Yes.
divided families.
So,
but it sounds like he did well.
He did very well, and I ended up getting raised by his sister, and so my aunt, who I will call my mom interchangeably. I have a very interesting family, but my dad decided when I was about 3.5, 4, that living in Harlem in New York City with elderly grandparents and his long working hours was not going to be conducive for my education. And so I went to live with his younger sister, who was married at the time that they decided that they would keep me full time. She was just pregnant with my younger cousin/sister. So I moved in with them when I was about 4 years old, initially in Poughkeepsie, New York. And then we moved to New Jersey, northern New Jersey, Fair Lawn, right outside of New York City. And I was able to go to kindergarten there in Fair Lawn. And interestingly enough, I did not speak nor hear a word of English until I started kindergarten.
Really?
Correct. I only spoke Spanish, and Spanish TV was on in the household. And because my name is German, my grandfather was German, moved to Cuba. The kindergarten teacher did not know that I didn't speak any English. There was no such thing as ESL or English as a second language then. But by November, when my parents, my aunt and uncle, went for the first parent-teacher conference, they came to apologize that, perhaps I was not as fluent as or understanding as other children, and the teacher had no idea who they were talking about. She said, I have no Spanish-speaking children in this class.
So you have a gift for language, it sounds
I guess.
That's really interesting.
I have vague memories of those days. I remember I would watch everybody else, and if you finished your assignment early, you could go play in the dress-up corner. The first one to finish the assignment would get the best costume or whatever, or play in the kitchen or whatever the kids wanted. And I remember I would watch what everybody else was doing, finish what I needed to do so that I could get there early and put on the wedding dress or whatever it was that the kids wanted to play with. So
that sounds like a lot of fun.
It was.
And so, did you continue your initial education there in New Jersey?
In New Jersey. So the first year was in public school, and then at a small Catholic school in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. That I went from first grade through eighth grade, and like most parochial schools, a fairly good education, but there were teachers that had more strengths in one area than another.
Of course.
We always were supplemented at home. I remember the first day of summer vacation, my parents, my aunt and uncle, my uncle was a lawyer in Cuba, and in the United States, he became involved in education. So he ended up becoming the president of our local community college, but worked himself up through the ranks. But he would set out our summer learning program literally the day that school ended. We would have workbooks and assignments to do that summer, and we would learn probably more than we learned in the entire academic year.
Sounds like you had some really good influencers around you.
It was probably the biggest influence is that my younger sister / cousin was born extremely gifted. And to the point where she often, at a year of age, could speak, could count, could spell, so Mensa type smarts. I'm smart, but nowhere near as gifted as she is. And we lived near Ridgewood, New Jersey, which had a gifted child society. And my parents did not want Lourdes, my sister, to have any type of education that I also did not have access to. So she clearly belonged in this gifted child society. I had to go several weekends to different psychologists for IQ tests because their minimum was, 120. And I would always get close, but not quite. And I think finally the school made an exception because they kept applying for me. And it was a fascinating little school. We would go on Saturdays, and then in the summer they had a summer camp program. But it was like college classes for young children. You could study dinosaurs. I took a tic-tac-type class when I was in third grade, a debate class when I was probably 10. So it was a neat setup and again, a gift. I probably would not have attended that had Lulu not needed. She needed more stimulation than any school could offer.
Well, it sounds like you were in an incredibly perfect place to get a good start, which you obviously did. And then I guess in the mid 80s, it was time to think about college, and you went to Cornell up in Ithaca.
I did.
How'd you make that decision?
So I went to Paramus Catholic High School, which was a Catholic high school close to my elementary school. And most kids in New Jersey would not apply to the Ivies. They stayed at Rutgers or went to the community college. And I think, again, it was my biologic father's influence and being at the Gifted Child Society that I learned about the Ivy League schools, and I said, I'll try to apply. Why not? And applied to several of them. And Cornell just was such a beautiful campus, and I fell in love with it when we went to visit. And I applied to probably, a dozen schools, got into most of them, but Cornell was my favorite. And that's what
it's a beautiful, beautiful place up there. And I'm really interested to hear what undergraduate school was like for you. It sounds like your primary education was so profoundly better than the average that maybe college wasn't so difficult for you.
No, actually the opposite. So interestingly enough, I got to college. I got into the College of Arts and Sciences as a pre-med biology major. And I don't know if it was just the being away from home for the first time, but my self-confidence tanked that first year, being around so many pre-med students that were top of their class. And I've always been an instinctive learner, and being with Lulu, my younger sister / cousin, I remember if I struggled with something, she would explain it in a way, even though she was much younger, that I could learn it. So I'm somebody who'll read a book if I don't get it the right way, or when we would take piano lessons, for instance, I would struggle with reading the notes, and she would give me some tip on how to remember them, even though she didn't need to read music. She could just look at it and understand it. So she was almost like my tutor. And when I got to college, and all these pre-med students were so competitive and cutthroat, and I struggled that first year so much, and I got fair grades. I was used to getting straight A's and being the top of my class, and I was struggling to get B's, and thought that I was a failure, and just not enjoying the academics like I thought I would. And there was a famous psychology professor named Jim Mass that I went to one of his lectures. It was hard to get into that psych class, but I remember sitting in on a class, and I was waitlisted for my second semester, and it changed my world. I loved the content. It really brought back to me why I was interested in pediatrics and child development. And my advisor, wise advisor, told me, if you really enjoyed this class and you are struggling as a pre-med being a biology major, why don't you consider switching colleges within Cornell to the human ecology school, because most of your classes will be interesting to you if you found Dr. Mass's lectures interesting. So unprecedented in those days. It was hard to get into arts and sciences, and human ecology had this reputation for being, for fashion designers and nutritionists, and the MRS degree. I remember somebody saying there weren't too many pre-med human ecology students, but I switched. My dad was initially upset because he thought that I had taken my eye off the prize, that I wasn't looking at medical school anymore. And I remember him in his Cuban accent saying, I don't want you to be a psicóloga, a psychologist. You're not going to make enough money. For him, success was money. For me, success was being happy and feeling like I was making a difference in the world. And I tried to tell him, look, you were saving tuition. Human ecology costs so much less than arts and sciences. And stubbornly, I persisted, even though he tried to talk me out of it. And it was probably the best decision I've made in my life, because I suddenly enjoyed, I got up and went to class, couldn't get enough of it. I really enjoyed what I was learning. I still took my pre-med classes, and I thought there's no way I was going to compete with all these, thousands of students at Cornell that were pre-med. And it turns out that by the time I applied, not only did I get into, I got all the interviews I wanted, I got into Cornell Medical School as an early admission, even though my grades and my MCATs were not as high as I thought they needed to be.
I want to ask you a little something about I want to go into the territory of the psychology of education, I guess. And it's interesting. Of course, I started a medical school a good bit earlier than you did, but in those days when I was making my preparation, the medical schools that I was interested in were universally recommending a much more broad-based undergraduate education. They said, we'll teach you the science later. You did better. You had better chances if you were a biology major or a chemistry major, but they really wanted you to have a much more broad-based liberal arts type education, which it sounds like is exactly what you got.
Yes.
And were you, at that time, were you actually being Were your advisors telling you that you would be better off in a strictly science major, or what advice were you getting? I guess is
a combination of my arts and sciences. When I think my biology, the initial advisor that I had basically said, you're not, you better think about this. If you're looking at medical school, the very first meeting I had, and I didn't fail any tests, but I didn't do as well as I expected. My time management was off. It's a lot when you think about it. An 18, 19-year-old who's, there's so many different factors that play into your first semester of college. But I remember them saying, you better think long and hard about whether, medical school is going to be for you. You need to do better in these classes if you're going to apply to medical school. And that made it actually the stakes higher. I felt like I needed to make a decision then and there about what my future was going to look like. And then it was a junior advisor who, after going to I'm almost wondering if that junior advisor is the one who invited me to go to the psych class. Because I can't remember how I ended up there, but it was life-changing.
Clearly, the admissions committee at the medical school were impressed with what you did, and it all worked out well for you, and that's good. And but then after the move into medical school, did you find medical school more challenging or less challenging than you expected?
It was back, especially Cornell University is in Ithaca. Cornell University Medical College, as it was called back in the day, was in New York City. And again, it felt like I had my freshman year. The basic sciences were intense. One of my best friends' mom ended up dying very early that semester, and that had a big emotional toll on me. And I struggled with some of my classes, but was able to get tutoring. And again, not the top of my class academically. And I had to give myself a break a little bit. I shone once we started our clinicals. I'm more of a clinician. I know how to find the answers to things and I can figure things out, but I'm not that nerdy book smart type of person. And I would say more of a people person, and I shone once we started interacting with patients. But I'm so appreciative of the 2 years of nose to the ground, basic anatomy, physiology, organic chemistry, all that. Those first 2 years of medical school were tough. I squeaked by, but I started giving myself a break, and that's what I tell young people going into education now. Nobody asks you what your grades are.
That is
once
so
you're
true.
in front of a patient, just try to be kind to yourself and try your hardest and learn what you need to learn, and not to sweat the small stuff. And it's not all about getting the straight A's or stressing yourself out.
That's great advice. And I'm gathering, looking at your CV, that it was your initial intention to go into anesthesia. Is that correct, or am I reading that wrong? Yeah.
That's correct. It was not my. I always had wanted to be a pediatrician, but ended up doing an anesthesia rotation. As it was, you couldn't get all your clinicals in your third year. So anesthesia was not until my fourth year of medical school. I really enjoyed that rotation, and I thought it would be a neat niche to be a pediatric anesthesiologist. At the time, I was dating a surgeon, and that played a lot into the decision to, instead of just going into the workforce, to go into an anesthesia residency. And it was a fascinating experience. I enjoyed learning about all the different levels of consciousness and what can happen in under anesthesia. But as luck will have it, I tore my ulnar collateral ligament skiing that first year and broke up with the boyfriend who was a surgeon. And so ended up...
So somebody was sending you a message.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a big believer that there's a big guy up in the sky that moves the chess pieces for us or helps us to make the right moves. And I've been blessed my whole life with some spiritual guidance that puts me in the right place at the right time. So
you made the switch to pediatrics primarily because of the injury, right?
Correct. What was happening is that I was not able to participate fully because it was my right hand, and I was unable to completely do more difficult cases, and
sure.
I was going to have to add a year, and the hand surgeon wanted to fuse the base joint because it was so unstable, and I ended up tearing my left ulnar collateral from stress, and it just didn't make sense to have another major surgery for a career that I liked. I thought a pediatric anesthesia practice where I would explain to parents, be more of a pre-op consultant was my idea, so that parents, especially in New York City, whose children needed congenital heart disease repair. In those days, you didn't meet with the anesthesiologist. The surgeon, was in charge of the case. And
right.
So many parents had anxiety about what was going to go on between the time the baby or child left their arms to when they saw them in recovery. And I thought, this would be I still wanted to be a pediatrician, but who explained the process.
Sure.
And so I did not finish that. I did a year and a few months of a CA1 and a quarter of a CA2 year, and landed in, again, the big guy up in the sky. Probably the best job a pediatrician could have. Dr. David Smith, who was not related in any way, shape, or form to me, had an office right across the street from New York Hospital and happened to be looking for a female pediatrician at the time that I made the decision not to go through with my thumb fusion. So I landed.
And I guess the fairly obvious question has already been answered, and that is, have you had any regrets at all about not being able to complete anesthesia, or
none
are you just
whatsoever?
Deliriously happy that you've landed where you are?
Deliriously happy. I am a people person. I really probably would not have enjoyed, other than my outpatient, explaining to parents what the anesthesia was going to be like. It was definitely not going to be the career for me, but it has given me a skill set, intubating newborns, feeling comfortable. If God forbid I'm in a situation where a child needs to be resuscitated, I feel very comfortable and confident because I had that experience. And we get some ICU experience when you're a pediatric resident, but not to the extent with airways that I had as an anesthesia resident.
So let's take just a short break for a minute or two. I want to take a moment to talk to you about a new sponsor that we have here on Prescription for Success. Physician Outlook is a new magazine platform built for physicians and by physicians, and it's designed to showcase unique physician talents. Sometimes it might be clinical talents, but mostly it's about the intersection between clinical and non-clinical talents, whether it be writing or painting or cooking, or maybe even making a political statement in front of a state and local governing body, or even at the nation's capital, and dozens of other things. It's available online and in print. It's visually stunning on all of its platforms. I promise it's really unique in terms of physician lifestyle magazines. I think you'll really enjoy it. We think it's just the thing to fill your prescription for success. And like the Prescription for Success podcast, Physician Outlook magazine amplifies the voice of any doctor who has something to say, and also uniquely engages patients who still believe in physician-led, team-based care. And Prescription for Success listeners can get $20 off an annual subscription fee by visiting rxforsuccesspodcast.com/physician outlook. And now let's get back to today's interview. All right. Well, now let's talk about the early years of your practice. I think I've got it right from looking at your CV that you continue to spend a good bit of time in the city, in New York.
In New York City, yes. I was basically didn't leave the Upper East Side of New York for almost 2 decades on and off. Worked for Dr. David Smith, who had a practice that was for children of very high net worth patients, but also a lot of the doctors and nurses' kids would come to that practice. So I was exposed to, general bread and butter pediatrics, but also a clientele that fascinated me and continues to fascinate me, because they're children who are often being raised by nannies, by a whole household of staff person, and are sometimes emotionally needing someone. You would think that children born into such wealth would want for nothing, but their anxiety and depression and self-worth, I found it at a very young age. As a new pediatrician, I love to talk to kids and the family unit to understand what made them tick, even if they were there for a simple ear infection or a sore throat. I'd love to gather that social history and
that's
and try
really
to help
interesting.
Them.
And I don't know why I wouldn't have guessed that, but that's really an interesting concept of your exposure to that many children who were kind of raised with parents in absentia. And it sounds like it clearly had an effect on them.
And it was interesting because as I gained my confidence, I was a young, I was in my 20s when I first started working for Dr. Smith. And it took me a year to 2 to start giving advice different from his advice, which was to young new parents. It's okay if you can't be there for your child and you have a nanny, or a nanny in the Hamptons and a nanny in the city. It's okay that your child bonds to them, because what I was seeing, which was disturbing, was that the parents would almost get jealous of anybody who bonded well with their child or that their child bonded well with. They would switch to a new caregiver if they were insecure themselves as a parent. If the child started speaking, let's say in Spanish, because their nanny was Spanish speaking, and would go to them for comfort versus the parent, I would advise that's not a bad thing. That means your child is forming strong attachments.
Sure.
And don't keep switching nannies because you think that they're taking over your role. It's actually important for your child. And I'd give them tips on how to be more present, despite their travel and work schedules, so that your child always knows who their parent is. What I saw early on that my predecessors weren't addressing was the importance of continuity and forming strong attachments in this very privileged set of children.
That's a really interesting sociologic phenomenon that you're describing that I would never have guessed. There are obviously remarkably wealthy people everywhere. I grew up in the South, for example, and those people were around, but they didn't have they didn't exist in a big community of wealthy people like the people in New York City, I suspect.
Correct.
And I can see how that culture could have had a profound effect on the children. And it sounds like you picked up on it fairly quickly.
Yes.
And did your part to deal with it. That's really interesting.
And made partners with one of my favorite people of all time is the grandmother of some of my patients. And our first encounter wasn't pretty. Her first granddaughter was born, and this was a much anticipated birth. And, they had handpicked my boss as the pediatrician, and the baby was born prematurely. And he happened to be in Italy on like a month-long vacation with his wife, and I was holding down the practice. And really, I had, even David, my boss, would not have had a caretaking role in the beginning. The baby was in the NICU, but I remember coming to visit because that was our role, to kind of be the intermediary between the NICU team and getting ready for the baby to be discharged. And this grandmother said, "Who are you?" and started literally like kind of almost hitting me. And her husband had to hold me back. She's like, "You're a baby. You can't possibly be taking care of my granddaughter." And I chose. And she, after her husband said, "Calm down, calm down," she ended up being almost my fairy godmother in New York City. She loved my beginnings. We came from similar backgrounds. She had grown up in I don't know if she was a child of immigrants, but definitely had not been born wealthy, lived in an area of New York City that wasn't the nicest, and had brought herself up and was fascinated by my story. And she started referring me as the pediatrician. So I grew my practice very quickly, whereas I had been hired to just kind of help out with the practice. She had all of her friends' kids that were having children come to me, and she encouraged me actually to start my own practice, which is why you see me leaving for Georgia and coming back to New York City. And she had her Filipino staff. I started taking care of all of the children. She would pay for the children of her staff to come to me. And just one of the most generous women I've ever met. And I think the reason for it, they were healthy kids, is that she wanted these kids of immigrants to see that they could become anything they wanted. It was primarily so that they would be exposed to look at, because she would always come with them and say, tell them your story, how you...
what a very thoughtful thing for her to do.
She was really one of a kind. Story. She's passed away, but I miss her greatly, because her grandkids are all grown up now, all getting married, and I know she's watching them from wherever she is. But she was a great woman. And
back to your time in Atlanta, how long were you there?
I was only there a year. It was a friend of mine was working down for urgent care, and Eggleston Children's Hospital had set up one of the nation's first urgent care centers. And in New York City, basically, that's what I was doing, was taking care of the urgent needs of this well-established set of families who saw my boss, David Smith, Ed Davies, a whole bunch of big named pediatricians. They were all near retirement age and loved to, take long vacations in summer in the Hamptons. And they needed some young blood to help take care of the evenings and weekends. And in the summer, they would disappear from the city. And so I had my dad's, what we call in Spanish, chispa, for business. And I said, this would be an urgent care, way before urgent cares were even a thing. This would be fascinating to bring this concept to New York City, that you would see, I would see the children for acute needs, but return them to their medical home for their primary care. In addition to just seeing my own patients, I wanted to not take any insurances and just see fee-for-service patients and return them back to their own doctors. And that's what I did. In Atlanta, I got training in how to, what their protocols were. And then I returned and opened my own practice.
Yeah. How'd you like living in the South?
I loved it. Funny, the very first time, though, coming from Manhattan and grocery shopping for the first time, I was like, why is this guy following me? And And it was somebody helping me load my groceries in the car. But, you don't come from Manhattan and just trust that somebody's leaving, I was suspicious. And then I realized, wait a second, everybody's being helped out to their car and their groceries are being loaded. I thought I was being mugged, but
That's funny.
But I did love that.
Yeah.
Made a lot of good friends and still keep in touch with some of my Atlanta buddies.
It's a great story. And so moving along with things, at some point, you made a decision to move, not actually upstate New York. You moved over into Pennsylvania. How did that come about?
Actually, the transition was my business plan lacked one major. When I opened my practice back up in Manhattan in New York City, I knew that the summer the doctors disappeared to the Hamptons, and I should have known better. So did my patients, 90%. So in the summer, my first summer being a doctor on my own, 80% of my phone calls came from Southampton, East Hampton, Long Island. And I was coordinating care for these patients and having them be seen at one of the two practices. There still remains one practice in East Hampton and one practice in Southampton, New York. And so I found myself making them appointments at one of those two practices, although the parents were calling to say, could I just phone in some amoxicillin? Could I, do this, do that? And I said, no, that's not good care. We need to have you seen. And then I got the bright idea of let me find out if they needed any help in the Hamptons. So I started, I became an independent contractor for first one practice and then the other, and enjoyed that so much that I was there for a lot of the summer, and Saturdays and Sundays was their biggest need. And traveling back to New York City, I don't know if you've ever been to the Hamptons, but it's a one road in, and then you get on a highway that becomes a parking lot in the summer with all the travelers back and forth from Manhattan, that I ended up closing my practice on Mondays, so I wouldn't have office hours in New York City, and I would stay in the Hamptons and work on a Monday instead of trying to make it back to the city. And what ended up happening, interestingly enough, my Spanish heritage came, and word got out from all the nannies and housekeepers and that I spoke Spanish, and my Mondays was filled to the brim with basically the children of undocumented immigrants that were on Medicaid or uninsured. And I had this great contrast, this life where I saw the very wealthy children, and then the other extreme, children that were living, in poverty, whose parents worked crazy hours. And it was back in the days of managed care, where the practice I was moonlighting for or working for did not realize that the Medicaid card that the parent was presenting was not being accepted for payment because the patient had chosen a managed care plan. So I worked an entire year, and they paid me for the amount of patients I saw. And she found out at the end of the year that she was not getting reimbursed for any of the care I provided because of the plan that those Medicaid patients had. And so I started working for the county so that I could continue to see those patients, and then I would moonlight for the private practices. And that's how I got into public health. I ended up working for the county and seeing my patients. And 9/11 happened a year after our daughter was born, and we decided to move out of New York City and out to the Hamptons full time. And I think what struck me about that is that I really enjoyed rural living. It reminded me of being back in Ithaca. That 9 months out of the year was just relaxing. I liked having just basic country folk 9 months out of the year. And the reason we eventually moved to Pennsylvania is that after 9/11, the city pretty much dumped back into people who are afraid to live in New York City. And so the things I was trying to get away from those 9 months, it became less pleasant to be in the Hamptons because the traffic increased, the attitudes increased. My daughter started preschool with kids who, were comparing what kind of Ugg boots they were getting for Christmas and all this. We wanted to raise her in a very simple environment, and that's how we ended up in rural Pennsylvania when she turned 6.
Did that? I'm always interested if the reality aligns with the expectations. You're still there, so
yes.
I'm assuming that turned out to be pretty close to what you expected.
Very much so, and especially for our daughter, who ended up being, I think, a bigger fish in a small pond, as opposed to if we had stayed in the Hamptons. Mm-hmm. That kind of competitive, everybody, was doing the same thing and applying to the same summer camps, and it's just a competitive mm-hmm. type of environment that's not healthy for children. And I wanted her to feel confident, play sports, and be able to actually play and not be benched. And she has thrived in the environment, got into Penn State, Maine on her first, that was her dream school, and she got in, and she's a sophomore there. And I couldn't have imagined a better life for her. So rural living is something I would recommend to any physician. Even big city, there's something about, you can always go visit the big city, but there's nothing like living in a small community.
So it sounds like it was a good decision for you and a good decision for her.
Yes.
And if you don't mind, I want to take a little bit of a detour here since we're talking about your daughter. And in fact, I can disclose to you right now that the way that I found you and chased you down to get this interview is because of an article that I read in your magazine, which we're going to talk about the magazine a little bit later also, about your daughter's experience with COVID-19.
Yes.
And it's a great article. Maybe you want to tell people how to find that, but I'd like for you to give us the summary of that. It's an interesting story.
Yes. And I won't bore you with the details, but it's if you go on to my website for my magazine, physicianoutlook.com, and the title of the article is "The Scarlet C." And the C obviously stands for corona.
Great title, by the way.
Thank you.
Love that.
So I just finished saying how great it is to live in small towns. And my daughter had a somewhat unpleasant experience in that she returned from a trip to London in March that I had foolishly let her go on. I knew better. Looking back, the coronavirus had been in the news since at least late January. We knew it was hitting Italy quite extensively. We had some cases on the West Coast, and I let her go on this trip, which so did 3 of her friends' parents. One of them actually backed out, but looking back, I still have some regrets or guilt about letting her go because I knew it was a risk. And as luck would have it, she had the best week of her life in London and returned with a cough that I feel I had heard before. I work at a university now as a small private Catholic university in upstate New York near my home. I feel like I had heard this cough before because I believe I had a coronavirus patient probably in late January who had spent a few weeks in their hometown or their home in China. And she did not have a fever. My daughter did not have a fever upon return, but it was a deeper cough than she's ever had with any infections. And right away realized, this is not good. We had not had any cases, I think, at all in Pennsylvania at that time, and definitely not in our little town. maybe some in Pennsylvania, but not very many. And New York City had not yet gotten too crazy. It hadn't hit its peak yet as a hotspot, but we quarantined her in the home, and she fortunately did not get as sick as other people. I was keeping an eye on social media and trying to learn as much as I could about, what was landing people in hospitals. And she had a horrific cough, probably the worst cough I've ever heard her have. But what really concerned me is on her third or fourth night home, she called me from her room. We were trying to stay away from her. My husband stayed in our bedroom. I stayed downstairs. We were all kind of quarantining ourselves. But she's like, Mom, my SAT is 88, 87, 88. And I'm like,
no kidding.
It's just like your heart stops. You forget that you're a physician. And I ran up there, no mask, no gloves. And I said, no, you need a new battery. That thing's not working. And I put it on my finger, 99, 100, put it back on her finger. And she did not seem in any distress. She was coughing every 5 minutes, did not seem like she was distressed at all. But sure enough, her SAT was, she'd have to take a deep breath for it to go up into the low 90s. Wow. And that panicked me, frankly. It was probably one of the scariest moments of my life.
I would imagine.
But I was trying to remain calm, and she did make it through, did improve. I did start a very controversial medication that I feel helped her improve. But we also gave her high dose vitamin C, D, and zinc. And in fact, the night she started her meds that night was a Wednesday night. I started them at like 5 a.m. on that Thursday. And I remember during the night, Thursday night, thinking, oh, she's not coughing at all. But then I had to run upstairs because my immediate thought was she had a prolonged QT and is dead. I better
breathing? Yeah.
is she breathing? And thank God she was breathing, and actually had the first good night's sleep that she had in 4 or 5 days by that point.
Yeah. So, as I recall from the article, there was some sort of unpleasant issues in the little village where you live.
Yes. So the health department in all of the United States would report that, that if a case occurred. And so the minute that Potter County, where we live, reported its first case, which is confidential information, they don't tell you who it is, but we live in a very small town. People started saying, this must be those girls who traveled. She traveled with one of her best friends that also goes to Penn State, but from our little town. And the social media rumors started flying, and almost to a comical extent, because she literally did not leave our home. My husband didn't go out. I didn't go out. But just like that telephone game where somebody says one phrase and it's turned into another. People had her infecting, playing basketball. I was like, she is in no way, shape, or form able to play any sport, and nor has she left the home. They had me infecting newborns, my husband spitting at a McDonald's worker. All these horrible things were being said on social media, and speculating who it was that was sick with the dreaded coronavirus. And people were driving up and down our street slowly, and we live on a very rural road. And she, I thought, with the courage that I'm very proud of, ended up, quote unquote, outing herself on social media, saying, it is I who has this coronavirus. I made the decision to go on a trip, and I regret it, but I know better than to try to get anybody else sick, and I am quarantined in my home. And so that's what inspired me to write my article, because at that time, very few physicians, a lot of physicians were reporting caring for patients, but I think the first, at least in my groups of doctors, who actually had firsthand experience with it in their homes.
Well, it is a really compelling story, and despite the anxiety and the horror that you all must have had to deal with, I am confident that it's going to be an experience that will inform the rest of her life in terms of sort of the sociologic consequences and things that she went through way and above her organic illness.
Yes.
And, you hate, obviously, no one wants to see their child go through that, but fortunately, it did end well, and we're all very happy about that. And kudos to you for handling it as well as you did as well. And to bring the focus back to you, we've been at this conversation a good while, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I would like to hear a little bit more about what your pediatric practice is like right now, and I'm going to want to know some things about the magazine as well. So why don't we talk about your professional work, your pediatrics work right now? And
actually, right now I'm not doing general pediatrics other than during the summer and on certain weekends. I will take assignments as a pediatric hospitalist or covering pediatric practices. But a few years ago, I became what's now quintessentially known as quote unquote burnt out of medicine. I had been working at the same rural hospital for almost 14 years and loved what I did. I was a general pediatrician in a neighboring county about 20 miles from my home in the hospital, and very, very poor population, generational disability, where the grandparents were on SSI for either mental illness or physical illness. The parents are on SSI. The children, I'd ask them at age 5 or 6, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they had no idea what that even meant. They'd go to school, but there was no career path. So very, very physically needy and economically needy population. And I am somebody who takes their time with a patient. I would rather take care of one person well than see 5 poorly and do.
No wonder you got burnt out.
Yes. Yeah. And the metrics and being treated like we were used car salesmen. How was the Press Ganey surveys just still irk me. And that we as physicians allowed all this to happen. The electronic health record, I was a medical director. I was in a position of leadership at my hospital, at my small rural hospital. And I was the cheerleader for getting us into the 21st century and getting us some electronic health records. But little did I know that what we were going to be handed was like the Atari version of, the 3D games that kids play now.
So many of us have been through that, Marlene, and I feel your pain. I was the guy that beat the drum for EMR in my hospital, and as we have all experienced, what was delivered was not an electronic health record.
No,
and, I don't mean to hijack the conversation, but do go ahead.
No, but that was part of my, because I'm also, as I've aged, I'm somebody who cannot keep my opinion to myself. My husband constantly tells me to bring it down a notch, but we became glorified data entry clerks, and I refused to write a note. In fact, I'll go into this at the end about my prescriptions for success are don't succumb to what the quote unquote man or the computer system wants you. We are healers. My job is to, even if I'm just seeing you for an ear infection or a sore throat, I need to know that backstory. Why are you here today? Is it because school, you've used up your requisite number of absentee, you're now on the truant list because your child hasn't gone to school for the 61st day. What brings you here today? Did you see something in the news that is worrying you? So I would take my time with patients, and that would also be reflected in my note, this clicking of yes, no, and everybody's note looks the same. That's not how I was trained. And it's important for the next person who picks up that patient to understand what my assessment and plan was. And so I constantly took my work home with me and didn't see the requisite number of patients that I was expected to see. And the hospital work, we would be called back to the hospital for sick newborns or an emergency room admission. And they implemented the CPOE, the computerized physician order entry. And I'm sorry, but a normal newborn set of orders is a normal newborn set. Admit to, give them vitamin K, they expected us to stop what we were doing. If I was in the middle of a patient encounter and a baby was born at 2 p.m., I was getting paged by the nursery as if there was an emergency because I had not signed my orders yet. And, that is ludicrous, because then I would ignore their phone calls and if there was a real emergency, that potentially put somebody at risk. But don't interrupt me to put in a silly set of orders that it's a standard order set. So stuff like that would just drive me crazy. And my CEO and I did not see eye to eye. I was constantly being called to the principal's office for having an attitude unbecoming of a medical leader. But it made me proud because I was standing up for my colleagues and standing up for my patients, because I just refused. So I basically, when my contract was coming due at my 14th year, I had no intentions of moving out of this location. We love our house. We love our community. But I said, I'm just going to start working locum, because I would see these locum doctors. We were down a pediatrician, and we would hire people to come in to cover at triple the rate that they would pay. I was paid well, but they were paying these locum doctors even better. And guess what? They were only seeing like 7 patients a day, because they would not pay overtime for their charting. And they were complaining that our EMR was so terrible that it was taking them time after work. And once the administrators saw that they had to pay them overtime, they put an end to that. And I was like, see, all right, so my 14 to 15 patients, not your 25 target, is not so bad, because we're proving that with these locum, they can only see 7 patients a day and finish the notes. So long story short is just I decided to resign, and I'm back in control for the last 2 years, back in control of my schedule. And I do a combination of jobs. For a while, I was working at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia as an urgent care pediatrician. 6 days a month would give me full benefits. And so I took that job for that reason. It was 5 hours from my home, but I would stay there for the 6 days, get that out of the way. And my intention with all of this was to report and write about what is wrong with healthcare. Even the fact that a physician has to worry about where they're going to get their benefits is reflective of what's going on in the world today. That you cannot go out and buy an insurance policy that's actually going to cover you if you have health issues without breaking the bank. The fact that I had to find an employer to help me finance my benefits for my family is so different than it was 20 some odd years ago, when you could afford to have your own practice and cover your not only your own, but your employees' health benefits. That's changed. And why has that changed? So I, again, saw that nobody's writing the truth about what's going on in medicine. Everything's censored. If you submit to any mainstream media what our opinions are about electronic health records, it doesn't get accepted by your traditional, Wall Street journals or your New York Times. You have to know somebody for that to be reported. And so I decided,
nobody wants to hear a doctor complain, right?
Correct. But the patients all know. They think it's our, that we love looking at this computer. So, I find that if you actually ask the patient and the patient what their experience is, they're missing the days of where the doctor looked you straight in the, where you could have a conversation.
Yeah.
And they've come to accept the intrusion, the solution or the workaround is to hire a scribe. And I think that's annoying to have a third person in the room.
Really?
But patients and physicians have come to accept that as at least a better alternative than the doctor clicking and pounding away. So that's basically, over the last 2 years, I've reinvented myself. I'm approaching 60, but it's exciting. Every day is new.
It's clearly been a very successful reinvention. And how long has the magazine been out?
Since our first issue went live in February. So I'm about to publish. And so at a time that we do not see many written publications, I'm trying to reach colleagues that are not online because of the burnout from, this is my theory anyways, that a lot of doctors that are still in practice don't want to get home and log on to their computer to read anything else. They've had presence on social. Yeah. They've had enough computer, and their presence on social media is not there at all. And they're still reading the New York Times, the paper version. They're getting old-fashioned magazines, and probably keeping their sanity, frankly, because you can only take so much electronics. We see it in our children. We see it in it. It's a tool that can add to everybody's frustration. So I'm strategically trying to get the written magazine, the actual hard copy, out to as many physicians as possible, with the goal that it will be something that they leave in their waiting room and that a patient will pick up or another colleague will pick up, because it echoes a lot of the themes that is everyone's experience these days, I think, or the majority of physicians.
I think that's a great idea.
So, except for coronavirus, it doesn't let you have any magazines in the waiting rooms. So I'm hoping that
maybe that will change.
I hope so.
Well, Marlene, I have really enjoyed talking to you, and quite frankly, I'd be happy to go on and on. But the name of the show is Prescription for Success, and it's kind of my favorite part of the show.
Yes.
So what I'm going to do is close my mic for a few minutes and invite Dr. Marlene Wüst-Smith to give us her prescriptions for success.
Great, thank you. So my prescriptions for success are, whether it's with a patient or with healthcare reform or with any problem that I encounter, and I encourage young physicians or anybody going into healthcare, is that it is our job and our duty to take as thorough a history as possible and to do that complete exam. You can't just, everything now in medicine is an algorithm, and I feel that it's very, very important to return to our roots, not to be hasty, not to make cursory diagnoses without getting to know your patient's history and as much of a complete history as you can. So examples that I give is, you can have a patient who is depressed fill out a form, and you can get a score, whether, their PHQ 9 score or their general anxiety screen is positive, and you can write them a quick RX, a quick prescription. It's not enough. We need to know a little bit about their history, a little bit about their support systems, their coping mechanisms, because giving them a quick prescription for fluoxetine, which is what UpToDate tells us to do, is not enough. And we need to really develop those relationships with our patients, and moving further and further away from that in medicine. And that at its crux, I use that same philosophy when it comes to advocacy and to the magazine, is that we can't just give a quick solution. Let's get Medicare for all so that we don't have these issues. No, let's delve into the issues. How did we get to where we are today in medicine? Who are all the players? What interfering factors are there? Do a thorough history, and metaphorically speaking, a physical on the state of healthcare today and try to dissect it and get everybody's point of view, because that's how we're going to come to solutions. So that's my first recipe for success. My second is to communicate that in as succinct as a way as possible, but complete. You need to have that assessment and plan summarize the issues at hand and reiterate the whether it's a physical complaint or diagnosis, or again, if we're talking about advocacy or high healthcare costs or the problems with prior authorization, we need to succinctly summarize what the issues are and propose a solution or a plan. And my third and last recipe for success is to always, always remember the oath that we take as physicians, and that is to do no harm. I have expanded that oath and wear a bracelet that has a secret message on the inside. On the outside, it says, do no harm. And on the inside, it says, but take no shit. And that those three things are what keep me sane and keep me passionate about being a physician.
Well, Dr. Marlene Wüst-Smith, it has been a real pleasure having a conversation with you today, and I can't tell you how grateful I am that you were willing to take the time. I know you've got a lot on your plate with the new magazine up and running. So thank you for being here. And before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to let our audience know how they can follow you and how they can get to the magazine and anything else that you would like them to know about how to watch your progress. Great.
Thank you again, Randy. It's been a pleasure. The easiest way to find me is to go on to www.physicianoutlook.com and please, please, please hit the subscribe button and contact me if you're having any financial difficulties. I have some coupons and ways for you to get discounted mailed magazines. But my passion, my goal is to get as many of these printed and out in circulation back in hair salons, barbershops, doctors' offices, so that people can learn truths and visit us online as well. But I feel that we're preaching to the choir. We're doing a good job online educating physicians who are starting to rise. And so if you are a physician listening and you are passionate about restoring some normalcy to the physician-patient relationship and want to help or write or contribute, or if you paint, please send me your content. This is a magazine I founded for physicians, by physicians, and those who still care about the physician-patient relationship. And you'll find on the website how to follow me on Twitter and Instagram and all the other social medias, Facebook and all those places. But I would love it if people just got the magazine into their hands. That's beautiful, if I say so myself. I've found some tremendous physician artists that their work is breathtaking, and this COVID crisis has inspired them to create more art and more poetry, and I'm honored to be able to showcase it.
Dr. Marlene Wüst-Smith, pediatrician from rural Pennsylvania and enlarging magazine publisher. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Randy. You have a great week.
Thanks. So that will wrap up another episode of Prescription for Success. But before we go, I want to take a moment to invite you to visit our website at rxforsuccesspodcast.com, where you can become a subscriber. And we'd also like for you to be a part of the podcast. Just visit rxforsuccesspodcast.com, click on the Contact Us button at the top of the homepage, and then scroll to the bottom and click on the red Record button, and then go ahead and read us your personal prescription for success. If you stumble, like I do occasionally, just start over and we'll edit everything to make you sound great. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much for listening, and don't forget to fill your prescription for success with my next episode.